I stood beside my husband's casket, staring at the polished wood as family and friends filled the church. The room echoed with quiet sobs, whispered condolences, and memories of the man everyone had come to honor. My husband, David, had died suddenly from a heart attack at the age of 64. After 32 years of marriage, I thought I knew everything about him. I thought there were no surprises left between us. I was wrong. The funeral service was beautiful. People spoke about David's kindness, his sense of humor, and his willingness to help anyone in need. I listened through tears as friends shared stories I had heard many times before. When the service ended, guests slowly began leaving. Some hugged me, others squeezed my hand, offering comfort they hoped would ease my grief. As the crowd thinned, I noticed a woman standing alone near the back of the church. She looked to be in her early 40s. I had never seen her before. She wasn't speaking to anyone. She simply stood there watching. A few minutes later she walked toward me. "Margaret?" she asked softly. "Yes." Without another word, she handed me a sealed envelope. "He wanted you to have this after the funeral." Before I could ask who she was, she turned and left. I stared after her in confusion. Who was she? And what was in the envelope? That night, alone in my bedroom, I finally opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The moment I saw David's handwriting, my heart broke all over again. The letter began, "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. First, I want you to know that loving you was the greatest blessing of my life. But there is something I've never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I was ashamed of it for many years." My hands trembled. I kept reading. David explained that when he was 20 years old, years before we met, he had been involved in a terrible car accident. During a rainy night, his vehicle skidded across a road and collided with another car. A young woman named Sarah was seriously injured. Although the police investigation ruled the accident unavoidable, and no charges were filed, David never forgave himself. For years he carried guilt that no one knew about. But that wasn't the secret. The next part of the letter left me speechless. Several years after the accident, David learned that Sarah was struggling financially. Medical bills had overwhelmed her family. She was raising a young daughter while dealing with lasting injuries. David couldn't stop thinking about them, so he decided to help. At first he sent money anonymously. Then he continued, month after month, year after year, for more than 30 years. The mysterious woman from the funeral was Sarah's daughter, Rebecca. David had secretly supported their family for decades. Not because anyone forced him to. Not because he wanted recognition. But because he felt responsible for changing their lives in some way. As I continued reading, tears rolled down my face. The letter explained that Rebecca eventually became a teacher. She graduated from college, built a successful career, married and raised children of her own. David had quietly paid for part of her education. He had helped cover emergency expenses when her family was struggling. And somehow he had done all of this without ever telling me. I felt shocked, confused, even hurt. How could my husband keep something so important from me for over 3 decades? The answer came near the end of the letter. "I never told you because I didn't want my guilt to become your burden. I was afraid you would see me differently. I was afraid you would think I had betrayed your trust. Every year I planned to tell you, but every year it became harder. Eventually, I convinced myself that carrying it alone was easier." I put the letter down and cried. Not because I was angry, because I suddenly realized how much pain David had carried in silence. A week later, I contacted Rebecca. We met at a small cafe. She brought photographs, old letters, and memories of the man I thought I knew completely. She told me stories I had never heard. Stories about late-night phone calls when her family needed help. Stories about encouraging letters David had written when she doubted herself. Stories about how he celebrated her college graduation from a distance because he never wanted credit for helping her get there. Then Rebecca shared something that changed my perspective forever. She looked at me and said, "Your husband saved our family." I didn't know what to say. She explained that after the accident, her mother had fallen into depression. The family struggled financially and emotionally for years. There were moments when they felt completely alone. Then the anonymous help began. At first they didn't know who was sending it. Later they discovered it was David. But he made them promise never to tell anyone. He wasn't trying to ease his conscience, Rebecca said. He genuinely cared. He became the reason we never gave up. Hearing those words brought me to tears. For 32 years I had seen David as a good husband, a loving father, and a loyal friend. Now I was seeing another side of him. A man who had quietly devoted much of his life to helping others without expecting praise. A man who carried regret but chose to transform that regret into compassion. Months passed after the funeral. The pain of losing David never completely disappeared. But something changed inside me. Instead of focusing on the secret he kept, I began focusing on what the secret revealed. It revealed a man who understood that mistakes do not define a person. What defines a person is what they do afterward. One afternoon, while sorting through old documents, I found another note tucked inside a drawer. It was addressed to me. In it, David had written, "Life is complicated. People make mistakes. We carry wounds nobody sees. If I've learned anything, it's that kindness matters more than being right. If you remember anything about me, remember this. Whenever you have the chance to help someone, do it. Even if nobody knows. Even if nobody thanks you. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change an entire life." I read those words again and again. Today, whenever people ask me about my husband, I tell them the truth. David wasn't perfect. Neither am I. But he spent his life trying to make things right. His funeral was supposed to be the end of his story. Instead, it became the beginning of a new understanding. The stranger who approached me that day didn't bring a scandal. She didn't reveal betrayal. She revealed humanity. She showed me that the man I loved had spent decades quietly changing lives while asking for nothing in return. And in the end, that secret didn't make me love him less. It made me love him even more. Because sometimes the greatest measure of a person's character isn't what they do when everyone is watching. It's what they do when nobody knows. And that was the final lesson my husband left behind.